The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known universe. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang when light passed through them. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of alien species filled the curved seats that rose up toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. In the center of this hall, standing on a small platform that made him feel very small indeed, was Captain Samuel Wright. He was 42 years old, born in a small town in Ohio, and he had spent 20 years in Earth's Navy before volunteering to lead humanity's first mission beyond the solar system. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. The journey had taken 3 years. The Starship Horizon, carrying a crew of 30 brave men and women, traveled through a network of ancient gates that humanity had discovered near Jupiter. These gates, built by some long-dead civilization, connected distant points of the galaxy. Humanity had finally found proof that they were not alone in the universe. What they found was not what they had hoped for. High Arbiter Zethkos towered above the platform on a throne of pure crystal. He was a Vorath, one of the 7 elder species that ruled the galaxy. His body was made of living stone that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire chamber without any need for amplification. Species designation, human, Zethkos announced, reading from a holographic display. Origin world, Solthri, also called Earth, a small rocky planet in an unremarkable system on the outer edge of the galaxy. Biological classification, carbon-based life, dependent on oxygen and water. Average lifespan, 73 standard cycles. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 73 years was nothing to species that lived for thousands. Physical capabilities, Zethkos continued. Fragile tissue construction. No natural armor or weapons. Cannot survive in vacuum. Cannot regulate internal temperature effectively. Requires sleep for approximately 1/3 of their existence. Requires constant intake of food and water. More murmurs. Some of them sounded like laughter. Technological assessment. Primitive fusion-based power systems. No native faster-than-light capability. Limited artificial intelligence. Basic genetic engineering. Psychic ability. None detected. Zethkos set down the display and looked at Captain Wright with eyes that glowed like stars. Based on these findings, the Galactic Council classifies humanity as a Class 7 species. This places you in the protected primitive category. You will be assigned a small habitation zone in the outer territories where you may develop at your own pace. You are barred from council proceedings, military contracts, advanced technology exchanges, and settlement of any world within the core systems. Captain Wright felt his crew watching him through the holographic link back to the horizon. He could sense their anger, their disappointment. They had traveled for 3 years, left behind everything they knew, dreamed of joining a galactic community as equals. Instead, they had been measured, weighed, and found wanting. But Samuel Wright had not risen to captain by giving up when things got hard. With respect, "High Arbiter," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We did not come here to be classified like animals in a zoo. We came to establish diplomatic relations between our peoples as equals." The silence that followed was broken by laughter. Real, unmistakable laughter from dozens of different species. The translator in Wright's ear rendered it all the same, but he could hear the variations in pitch and tone. Some species clicked, others whistled, others made sounds no human throat could produce, but they were all laughing at him. Ambassador Threx of the Crix rose from his seat. He was a terrifying sight, standing 7 feet tall, his body covered in hard black armor, his head dominated by massive compound eyes and sharp mandibles that clicked when he spoke. The Crix were the warrior species of the Council, bred for combat over millions of years. Equals, Threx said, and his mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as amusement. "Little human, your species cannot survive a fall from your own body height without risk of injury. Your bones break from impacts that would not scratch a Crix hatchling. You require constant hydration, constant feeding, constant rest. You are, by any objective measure, one of the weakest sentient species we have ever encountered. Counselor Veth of the Mindari spoke next. She was beautiful in an unsettling way, with silver skin and eyes that had no pupils. The Mindari were telepaths, able to read thoughts and share consciousness across vast distances. Furthermore, Veth said, "Your minds are closed to us. We sense nothing from you but static and noise. This means you lack the neural complexity required for psychic integration. You cannot join the great conversation that connects all civilized minds. You are mentally isolated, alone in a way that most species cannot even imagine." Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos stood just behind Captain Wright. She was his executive officer, a brilliant strategist who had helped plan this mission from the beginning. She leaned close and whispered, "Sir, maybe we should just accept the classification for now. We can work on changing it later." Wright shook his head slightly. He knew that if they accepted this judgment, it would follow humanity forever. First impressions mattered, even in galactic politics. "I understand your assessment," Wright said, addressing the entire council. "You have measured our bodies and found them weak. You have scanned our technology and found it primitive. You have tested our minds and found them silent. But I would like to point out something you may have overlooked." He paused, making sure every eye and sensor in the chamber was focused on him. "Humanity reached the stars on our own. No one gave us gate technology. We found it ourselves, figured out how it worked, and built ships to travel through it. We did this in less than 300 years from the time we first achieved powered flight. We went from wooden ships and horses to interstellar travel in the blink of an eye by your standards." The laughter had stopped. The chamber was quiet now. "We have survived ice ages that covered our planet in glaciers miles thick. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that nearly ended our species entirely. Every time disaster struck, we adapted. We overcame. We are still here." High Arbiter Zethkos made a gesture that the translator interpreted as dismissive. "Many primitive species display remarkable tenacity before they are. It's inevitably absorbed by greater civilizations or expire from their own limitations. Your persistence is noted, but ultimately irrelevant. The classification stands." He turned away, clearly considering the matter closed. "A representative from the Colonial Administration will contact you regarding your habitation assignment. You may return to your vessel." 2 crystalline guards appeared to escort Wright off the platform. As he walked back through the great hall, surrounded by aliens who looked at him with pity or contempt or simple indifference, he kept his head high and his back straight. Maria Santos fell into step beside him. "That could have gone better," she said quietly. "It could have gone worse," Wright replied. "They laughed at us. They dismissed us. They think we are nothing, and that is somehow good." Wright allowed himself a small smile. "They have underestimated us, Maria. Every enemy humanity has ever faced has underestimated us, and every single one of them has learned to regret it." They reached the shuttle that would take them back to the horizon. As Wright strapped himself into the pilot's seat, he took one last look at the great hall of the Galactic Council. "We will be back," he said softly, "and next time they will not be laughing." 18 months passed after humanity received its classification. The Galactic Council assigned them 3 small worlds on the outer edge of civilized space. The planets were cold and harsh, with thin atmospheres and rocky soil. The Council expected humanity to struggle for generations just to survive. They were wrong. Within a year, the human colonies had established farms, factories, hospitals, and schools. Children were being born under alien skies. People who had left Earth as explorers were becoming something new. The first true citizens of a human interstellar civilization. The rest of the galaxy paid little attention. Humanity was a curiosity at best, a footnote in the great story of galactic civilization. The elder species had more important things to worry about than a handful of fragile creatures, scratching out an existence on the rim, than the Drexy. Attacked Kirith's station. The Drexy were not part of the Galactic Council. They came from the dark spaces between the stars, nomadic raiders who swept through systems like a swarm of locusts. They took everything of value, slaves, resources, technology, and left nothing but wreckage behind. For centuries, they had avoided council space. But a new warlord named Krath the Endless had united the scattered clans under his rule. He had grown bold. Kareth Station was a mining outpost belonging to the Vorith. 15,000 workers and their families lived there, extracting rare minerals from an asteroid field. When 60 Drexy warships appeared without warning, the station's small defense fleet was destroyed in minutes. The distress call went out across all council channels. The nearest military response was 3 days away. Everyone who heard the call knew what that meant. By the time help arrived, Kareth Station woe. It'd be stripped bare, and its people would be gone, taken as slaves or simply killed. The human colony ship Meadowbrook was 6 hours away. Captain Patricia Holloway received the distress call while her ship was traveling to the newest human settlement. She was 51 years old, a grandmother twice over. With gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from a lifetime of squinting at distant horizons, she had spent 30 years in Earth's merchant marine before volunteering for colonial service. The Meadowbrook was not a warship. It was a converted cargo hauler, slow and clumsy, designed to carry supplies and colonists safely across the vast distances between stars. Its only weapons were a few small cannons meant for destroying space debris. Against 60 Drexy raiders, it would last approximately 4 seconds. The ship carried 4,000 colonists, including 500 children. Holloway called her senior officers to the small conference room next to the bridge. They gathered around a table that was scratched and worn from years of use. "You all heard the signal," Holloway said. 15,000 people are going to die if nobody helps them. Chief Engineer Daniel Cooper shook his head. He was a tall, thin man with oil-stained hands that never seemed to get clean no matter how much he washed them. "Captain, with respect, we cannot fight Drexy warships. We would be throwing away 4,000 lives, including our own." "I know what we cannot do," Holloway replied. "I am more interested in what we can do." She activated the holographic display built into the table. It showed Kareth Station, the asteroid field around it, and the positions of the Drexy fleet. "The Drexy are raiders," she continued. "They are not soldiers. They hit fast, take what they want, and disappear before anyone can respond. Their tactics rely on terror and overwhelming force. They do not expect resistance because nobody ever resists them." Security Chief Marcus Webb leaned forward. He was a former Marine who had lost his left arm in a training accident years ago. The prosthetic replacement was military grade, stronger than the original. "What exactly are you thinking, Captain?" "I am thinking that we make them expect resistance." The plan she outlined was simple in concept and insane in execution. The Meadowbrook would approach Kareth Station broadcasting on all frequencies, identifying itself as the advance element of a human battle fleet. They would deploy their 4 shuttlecraft in a wide formation, each one broadcasting false signals to make it appear as a heavy warship. Meanwhile, every colonist capable of holding a tool would be organized into damage control teams to keep the ship functional under fire. "This is suicide," Cooper said. Probably, Holloway agreed. "Anyone who wants to stay behind in the shuttle bay can do so. I am not ordering anyone to come with me. This is volunteer only." She looked around the table at her officers. Not one of them moved. "Very well. Let us go save some lives." The Meadowbrook dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kareth system with its communication array blazing. Captain Holloway stood at the center of her bridge, her voice calm and steady as she broadcast her message. "Attention Drexy vessels. This is Captain Patricia Holloway of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You are engaged in hostile action against a protected installation. You will withdraw immediately or face the full response of the Terran fleet." Aboard the Drexy command ship, Warlord Krath received this message with confusion. His tactical officers reported 1 large vessel and 4 smaller ones approaching, but their sensors were detecting strange readings. Ghost signals suggested many more ships hiding just beyond scanner range. "What is a Terran?" Krath demanded his intelligence officer check their database. "A primitive species, Warlord. Class 7. They possess no military capability. Krath bared his teeth in a predator's smile. Then this will be entertaining. Destroy them, and continue harvesting the station. 20. Drexy raiders broke formation and accelerated toward the Meadowbrook. What happened next would become legend. Captain Holloway had studied everything the human colonies could learn about the Drexy during the 6-hour approach. She knew they relied on fear. She knew they expected their prey to run or surrender. She knew they had never faced an enemy who simply refused to be afraid. As the Drexy ships closed in, the Meadowbrook accelerated directly toward them. All ahead full, Holloway ordered. Ram them if you have to. The Drexy, expecting their target to flee, hesitated for just a moment. In that moment, the Meadowbrook's small cannons opened fire. They were not designed for ship-to-ship combat, but at close range, anything could hurt. One Drexy raider took multiple hits to its sensor array and veered away blind. More importantly, the Meadowbrook was broadcasting everything that happened. The colonists on Kareth Station could see a human ship fighting for them. The message was clear. Help was coming. Hold on. The colonists aboard the Meadowbrook moved through the ship like a single organism. When a section took damage, repair teams were there within minutes to seal the breach and restore power. When a fire broke out in the engine room, it was contained in seconds. When the No. 3 shuttle was destroyed by Drexy fire, its pilot having drawn enemy ships away from the Meadowbrook, the remaining shuttles adjusted their formation without missing a beat. For 47 minutes, one converted cargo ship with a crew of civilians held off 20 Drexy raiders through sheer audacity, misdirection, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Then the real Council fleet arrived. They had been pushed to maximum speed by commanders who could not believe what they were hearing on the emergency channels. A primitive species fighting the Drexy. Impossible. They had to see it for themselves, the Drexy, seeing actual warships appear and believing them to be the human reinforcements that had been promised, fled into hyperspace. Warlord Krath, his confidence shattered by what had happened, would never raid Council space again. When the shooting stopped, the Meadowbrook was barely functional. 17 colonists were dead. Another 112 were injured. The hull was filled with holes. The engines were running at 15% capacity. Admiral Sethrix of the Vorath fleet hailed them. His crystalline face appeared on the damaged bridge screen, looking at a scene of chaos and destruction. Emergency lights flickered. Exposed wires sparked. Wounded crew members were being carried to the medical bay. In the middle of it all stood Captain Holloway. A bandage wrapped around her head, still giving orders to her damage control teams. Human vessel, Admiral Sethrix said. Explain your actions. Captain Holloway looked at the screen with tired eyes. 15,000 people needed help. We were the only ones close enough to give it. What else were we supposed to do? The Admiral had no answer. The news of what happened at Kareth Station spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every species with access to the communication networks heard the story. A colony ship full of civilians from a primitive species had held off 20 Drexy warships for nearly an hour. They had lost 17 of their own, but saved 15,000 lives. The Galactic Council could not ignore it. High Arbiter. Zethkos convened a special session in the Great Hall, where humanity had been judged 2 years earlier. Representatives from all 7 elder species were present. Observers from dozens of other civilizations filled the upper galleries. Holographic screens displayed the recordings from the battle, playing on a loop for all to see. The footage showed the Meadowbrook charging directly at the Drexy formation. It showed civilians running through smoke-filled corridors to repair damage while the ship shook from enemy fire. It showed a grandmother standing calm on her bridge, giving orders as if she were directing traffic on a busy street rather than fighting for her life. It showed humans refusing to die, Counselor. Veth of the Mindari was the first to speak. Her silver skin seemed duller than usual, and her voice carried none of its typical confidence. This is unprecedented, she said. A Class 7 species should not be capable of such coordination under extreme stress. Our psychological models predicted that human fear responses would overwhelm their cognitive function within minutes of combat. Instead, they maintained effective operations for 47 minutes against a superior enemy. Admiral who had witnessed the aftermath personally, rose to address the council. Their ship had no business surviving even one exchange of fire, he said. Their technology is primitive. Their hull was composed of basic alloys that our weapons would cut through like water through sand. And yet they endured. I have commanded fleets for 300 years, and I have never seen anything like it. Ambassador Threx of the Crix clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. When he spoke, his tone was very different from the mockery he had shown 2 years earlier. I have been reviewing human history since the incident. What I found is troubling. He activated a holographic display showing Earth's timeline. Images flashed across the screen. Ancient battles fought with swords and spears. Plagues that swept across continents. Wars that killed millions. Natural disasters that should have ended their species entirely. Humans have nearly destroyed themselves 17 times by our records, Threx continued. They have faced extinction-level events over and over again. Each time they survived, each time they came back stronger, they are not physically impressive by our standards. They do not live long. They have no natural weapons or armor, but they possess something we did not account for in our classification. And what is that? High Arbiter Zethkos asked. Threx turned his compound eyes toward the human delegation that waited at the edge of the hall. They do not know how to quit. They do not know how to surrender. When everything tells them they should give up, they fight harder. When death is certain, they look for a way to make their death mean something. I have studied 100 species in my career. I have never encountered anything like this. The chamber fell silent. Captain Maria Santos stepped forward onto the same platform where Samuel Wright had stood 2 years before. She had been promoted after the battle, given command of a new ship being built with human hands and human ingenuity. She had been chosen to represent humanity at this session because she understood both the military and diplomatic implications of what had happened. I appreciate the Council reconsidering our classification, she said. Before you make your decision, I would like to share some information. She activated her own display. It showed not battle footage, but images of the human colonies. In 18 months, we have built 3 functioning settlements on worlds your experts said would take decades to develop. Our population has grown by 20% through natural births. We have established farms that grow food and soil, your scientists called barren. We have built hospitals using equipment we adapted from mining machinery. Our children are learning in schools constructed from local materials because we could not afford to import anything. The images shifted to show humans working alongside members of other species. Vorith miners teaching crystalline engineering techniques to eager human students. Human mechanics showing Kelith traders how to repair equipment that the traders would normally have thrown away and replaced. We have started building relationships with our neighbors, Santos continued. The Varoth workers from Kareth Station have been visiting our colonies. They are curious about us. They want to understand how we did what we did at the station. We have been sharing knowledge freely with anyone who asks. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. You classified us as inferior because we are fragile, because we have no psychic abilities or natural weapons. But you measured the wrong things. You measured what we are. You should have measured what we do. High Arbiter Zethkos shifted on his crystal throne. For the first time, his expression showed something other than cold detachment. What are you proposing? He asked. I am proposing that you stop protecting us and start working with us. We are not asking for charity. We are not asking to be treated better than we deserve. We are asking for the opportunity to prove ourselves as partners in this galactic civilization. Give us access to your technology exchanges, and we will show you things you never imagined possible. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Species that had dismissed humanity as irrelevant now argued passionately about their potential. Some feared what humans might become with access to advanced technology. Others saw opportunity in their unique perspective and abilities. In the end, the vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity was reclassified from Class 7 to Class 4 provisional status. This granted them full trading rights and limited access to the technology exchange program. More importantly, it granted them observer status in council proceedings. They could not vote, but they could watch, learn, and speak when recognized. When the decision was announced, Captain Santos felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, there was work to do. High Arbiter Zethkos called her back to the platform as the session concluded. "You have been given an opportunity," he said, his voice resonating through the nearly empty hall. "Many on this council believe it is a mistake. They think you will fail, that you will prove yourselves unworthy of even this modest advancement. And what do you believe?" Santos asked. Zethkos was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost thoughtful. "I believe we have not seen the end of humanity's surprises. I watched the recordings from Karut Station many times. I saw your Captain Holloway standing on her bridge, wounded and exhausted, still fighting. I asked myself what would make someone do that. I could not find an answer in any of our psychological models." He leaned forward slightly, his crystalline body catching the light. "I have ruled this council for 600 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed civilizations destroy themselves and others achieve greatness. In all that time, I have learned one thing. The most dangerous mistake is to underestimate an enemy, and the most costly mistake is to underestimate a potential friend." Santos nodded slowly. "We will not let you down." "High Arbiter." "No," Zethkos said, a hint of something that might have been respect in his voice. "I do not believe you will." Outside the great hall, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere among them, 4,000 human colonists were celebrating the news. Children who had been born on alien worlds would grow up in a galaxy that no longer saw them as primitive. They would have opportunities their parents could only dream of it. It was only the beginning. 5 years after the battle at Karut Station, humanity had spread to 12 worlds. Their population had grown to nearly 2 million. They had established trade routes, research stations, and diplomatic missions across council space. But their greatest impact was not in territory or numbers. It was in the ideas they brought with them. Dr. Henry Patterson was 53 years old, a xenobiologist from Virginia who had spent his entire career dreaming about alien life. Now he was living among it, studying it, and finding connections that no one else had noticed. He stood before an audience of 200 alien scientists on the research station, Nexus Prime. His presentation concerned the Kelith, an ancient species known for their remarkable healing abilities. A special enzyme in their blood could regenerate damaged tissue, cure diseases, and extend life. Scientists had tried to synthesize this enzyme for thousands of years without success. The problem, Patterson explained, is that the enzyme breaks down immediately when removed from Kelith biology. Their blood has a very specific chemical balance that cannot be replicated. Every attempt to create the enzyme artificially has failed because we could not maintain the right environment. He paused, letting the audience absorb this familiar information. They had heard it all before. What they had not heard was what came next. Human stomach acid has almost the exact same chemical properties as Kelith blood plasma. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs of disbelief spread through the audience. A Synax researcher raised a mechanical hand. "How did you discover this?" she asked. Patterson smiled. "I asked a Kelith friend what his blood tasted like. He thought I was joking, but I was curious, so I ran some tests. One thing led to another. It was such a simple thing. For thousands of years, brilliant scientists had approached the problem with complex theories and expensive equipment. Patterson had solved it by asking a strange question and following where the answer led. Within a year, the first artificial Kelith healing treatments were being produced in human laboratories. The enzyme that had been impossible to synthesize could now be manufactured in quantity. Medical technology across the galaxy advanced by centuries in a single leap. This was the human element. Not strength or speed or psychic power, but a different way of thinking. Humans asked questions that other species never considered. They saw connections that were invisible to minds trained in rigid traditions. On the manufacturing world of Synax Prime, human engineers introduced a concept that seemed obvious to them but revolutionary to their hosts. The Synax built everything as single, integrated units. When a machine broke, the entire thing had to be replaced. The idea of building something from separate parts that could be removed and exchanged independently had simply never occurred to them. But why would you want parts that can be removed? A Synax foreman asked when the humans first proposed the idea. An integrated unit is more efficient. An integrated unit is more efficient until something goes wrong, replied Chief Engineer Rachel Torres. Then you lose the entire machine. With modular design, you only replace what is broken. You can upgrade individual components without rebuilding everything. You can adapt the same basic platform for different purposes just by changing the parts. The demonstration that followed changed Synax manufacturing forever. Within a decade, their industrial output had doubled while their resource consumption dropped by a third. The efficiency gains spread across the galaxy as other species adopted the same principles. In the telepathic academies of the Mindari, human students faced a unique challenge. They could not participate in psychic instruction because their minds were closed. They sat in classrooms where knowledge was being shared directly from consciousness to consciousness, unable to receive any of it, so they invented their own methods. Lisa Chen was 26 years old, one of the first humans to attend a Mindar university. She could not read minds, but she could read faces, body language, and vocal tones. She developed a system of note-taking that captured not just information, but emotional context. She created study groups where humans and non-telepathic species shared knowledge through conversation, repetition, and practical demonstration. Her methods proved remarkably effective. Students who used her techniques scored higher on examinations than students who relied purely on telepathic transfer. The Mindari, humbled by this discovery, began incorporating human teaching methods into their standard curriculum. You have shown us something we never expected, Counselor Veth told Chen during her graduation ceremony. We believe telepathy was the highest form of communication. We pitied species who lacked this gift. But you have demonstrated that there are many paths to understanding. Some of them we had forgotten even existed. Even in warfare, humans were changing things. Commander Lucas Grant was 40 years old, a tactical officer who had risen through the ranks of the newly formed Terran Defense Force. He had studied every military tradition in the galaxy. Looking for strengths to adopt and weaknesses to exploit, the Crix invited him to observe a training exercise. Their warriors were the most feared fighters in Council space, bred for combat over millions of years. General Threx, now the Crix military liaison to humanity, personally escorted Grant to the observation platform. You will see the finest soldiers in the galaxy, Threx said proudly. Our formations have been refined over 8,000 years. They are perfect. Grant watched the exercise carefully. The Crix moved with incredible precision, each warrior knowing exactly where to be and what to do at every moment. It was impressive. It was also predictable. Your formations are beautiful, Grant said when the exercise concluded. But what happens when you face an enemy who does not follow your rules? Threx's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. All civilized species follow the conventions of warfare. There is honor in combat. The Drexy do not care about honor. Neither do we. Grant proposed a joint exercise. 100 Crix warriors against 20 human soldiers in a simulated battle. The Crix agreed immediately, confident in their overwhelming superiority. The humans won. They did not win through strength or speed. The Crix outmatched them in both. The humans won through deception, misdirection, and a willingness to break every rule that the Crix considered sacred. Human soldiers hid in drainage, tunnels, and attacked from behind. They pretended to surrender, then struck when their enemies lowered their guard. They used the environment as a weapon, collapsing structures and creating obstacles that negated Crix's physical advantages. This is dishonorable, Threx said afterward. His voice carried shock rather than anger. This is how we survive, Grant replied. We cannot match your strength or your speed. We cannot match your numbers or your technology. So we fight differently. We fight to win, not to look good while losing. Threx was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. The Drexy have defeated us in 3 major engagements over the past century. Each time, they used tactics we considered beneath contempt. Ambushes, traps, attacks on supply lines. We lost because we were too proud to adapt. He turned his compound eyes toward Grant. teach us. Over the following years, human tactical doctrine spread through the Krik's military. Warriors who had once considered deception shameful learned to use it as a weapon. Formations that had been unchanged for millennia evolved to counter unpredictable enemies. When the Drexy returned, they would face a very different galaxy. Throughout Council space, humanity's influence continued to grow. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through simple contributions that made everything better. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge to produce results neither could achieve alone. The species that had been classified as inferior was becoming indispensable. High Arbiter Zethkos watched these developments with growing interest. He had ruled the Council for 6 centuries, and he had never seen anything quite like humanity's impact. "They are changing us," he observed to Counselor Veth during a private meeting. "Slowly, perhaps, but unmistakably. Is that a concern?" Veth asked. Zethkos considered the question for a long moment. I do not know yet. Ask me again in 100 years. He did not have 100 years. None of them did. The Drexy were already gathering their strength for a strike that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. And when that storm arrived, humanity would face its greatest test. 10 years after humanity first arrived in Council space, the Drexy returned. Warlord Krath had died in a failed raid on a neutral system, killed by the very fear and hesitation that the humans had planted in his heart at Kareth Station. But his successor was different. Supreme Commander Vexus had spent a decade rebuilding the Drexy clans into something far more dangerous than they had ever been before. Where Krath had been a raider, Vexus was a conqueror. He did not want plunder. He wanted empire. His fleet numbered in the thousands, gathering in the darkness between stars, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came on a quiet morning when Vorath Prime, the heart of Council civilization, received a transmission from the edge of its star system. 2,000 Drexy warships were approaching. They would arrive within hours. The attack was devastating. 60% of the orbital defense platforms were destroyed in the first wave of fighting. The great crystal cities on the planet's surface shook from weapons impacts in orbit. High Arbiter Zethkos, directing the defense from his command center, was wounded when a section of ceiling collapsed on him. The distress call went out across every channel. The Council fleet spread across dozens of systems to protect vulnerable colonies from exactly this kind of assault. Began racing toward home, but they were days away. Ships arrived in small groups, unable to coordinate, easy targets for Drexy squadrons that had been positioned specifically to intercept them. The situation was desperate. Then the Terran Defense Force arrived. Admiral Samuel Wright, the same man who had stood before the Council as a mere captain 10 years earlier, commanded a fleet of 47 ships. They were not the largest vessels in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced. But they were crewed by humans who had trained for exactly this moment. Wright stood on the bridge of his flagship, Carrier Endurance, watching the tactical display fill with red enemy markers. Around him, his officers worked with calm efficiency, calling out reports and adjustments. "All ships, this is Admiral Wright," he announced over the fleet channel. "We are going to break their center. Follow my lead and hit them as hard as you can. No fancy tactics. No complicated maneuvers. We punch through, turn around, and do it again until they break, or we do." The Terran fleet accelerated toward the Drexy, formation like a spear thrown at the heart of a giant. What followed was not elegant. Human ships took tremendous damage, their crews fighting fires and sealing breaches, even as they continued to fire weapons. 3 vessels were destroyed in the first hour. 5 more were crippled and fell out of formation. But the fleet did not stop. Every time the Drexy thought they had broken the human line, it reformed and came at them again. The humans were not alone. Krik's warriors, transported by human ships, boarded Drexy vessels and fought with a ferocity their ancestors had never displayed. They used tactics learned from human instructors, striking from unexpected angles, using deception and misdirection to multiply their effectiveness. Mindery. Telepaths coordinated fleet movements with unprecedented precision. They had learned to work alongside human officers whose closed minds forced them to develop new communication methods. The result was a command structure that combined telepathic speed with human adaptability. Vorith engineers kept damaged ships operational far longer than should have been possible. They applied modular repair techniques adapted from human designs, replacing critical components in minutes instead of hours. The battle lasted 18 hours. Samuel Wright did not sleep. He barely sat down. He moved through his bridge like a machine, making decisions, giving orders, adjusting tactics as the situation evolved. When his tactical officer was killed by a console explosion, Wright took over the station himself. When communications failed, he had runners carry messages between sections of the ship. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Human crews pushed themselves beyond every limit. When exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, they found reserves they did not know they had. When fear whispered that survival was impossible, they remembered why they were fighting and kept going. The tide began to turn in the 14th hour. Drexy formations, designed for overwhelming strikes against unprepared targets, started to fragment under the sustained pressure. They were raiders at heart, not soldiers. They did not know how to fight an enemy that simply refused to accept defeat. Supreme Commander Vexus, watching from his command ship, made a critical error. He ordered a concentrated attack on the human flagship, believing that killing Admiral Wright would break the human resistance. 20. Drexy warships converged on the Endurance. What Vexus did not understand was that humans did not fight for their commanders. They fought for each other. They fought for the people beside them. They fought because surrender was not something they knew how to do. When the concentrated attack came, 4 human destroyers moved to intercept. They placed themselves between the Drexy and the Endurance, absorbing fire meant for the flagship. One by one, they were destroyed. Their crews died at their stations, still fighting, still protecting their admiral. The last of these destroyers was the Resolution, commanded by Captain Nicole Harris. She was 29 years old, the youngest captain in the fleet, promoted because of her exceptional skill and courage. When her ship's engines failed and her weapons went silent, she faced a choice. She could surrender and save her surviving crew, or she could use the only weapon she had left, her ship. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the internal speakers. Her voice was calm despite the chaos around her. 47 of her original crew of 300 were still alive, most of them wounded. I am ordering immediate evacuation. Get to the escape pods. That is an order. Her first officer grabbed her arm. Captain, you need to come with us. Someone has to steer, she said simply. Get our people out. Now. The escape pods launched as the Resolution accelerated toward Vexus's command ship. The Drexy tried to destroy her, but the destroyer was already too close. Moving too fast, Nicole Harris's last transmission was received across the entire fleet. Earth did not send us out here to lose. Tell them we held the line. The Resolution struck Vexus's command ship at full speed. The explosion destroyed both vessels instantly. With their supreme commander dead, the Drexy fleet fell into confusion. They had no succession plan because Vexus had killed every potential rival. Without orders, individual captains made individual decisions. Some tried to continue fighting. Others fled toward the system's edge. Many simply stopped, paralyzed by the loss of leadership. The Allied fleet did not give them time to recover. By the 20th hour, it was over. The Drexy had lost more than half their ships. The survivors scattered into hyperspace, fleeing to the darkness from which they had come. It would be generations before they threatened Council space again. The cost of victory was enormous. 12 human ships had been destroyed. More than 4,000 humans were dead. The Endurance was barely functional, its hull scarred by 100 impacts, its crew exhausted beyond measure. But Vorith Prime was saved. The Council survived, and the galaxy would never forget what had happened. Admiral Wright stood on his damaged bridge as the last Drexy ships disappeared from his sensors. Around him, his surviving officers slumped at their stations, too tired to celebrate, too relieved to mourn. Not yet. Signal from the Council, Admiral, his communications officer reported. High Arbiter Zethkos is requesting to speak with you. Zethkos appeared on the main screen. His crystalline body was cracked in several places, damaged from the attack that had nearly killed him. But his voice was strong. "Admiral Wright," he said, "on behalf of the Galactic Council and all the species we represent, I offer our deepest gratitude. What your people did today will never be forgotten." Wright nodded slowly. He thought about the ships he had lost, the people who would never go home. He thought about Nicole Harris and her last words.
Howdy.
"We did what anyone would do," he said. "We protected our home." "This is not your home," Zethkos replied. "Your home is a small planet on the outer edge of the galaxy. You had no obligation to fight for us." Wright looked at the wounded officers around him. He looked at the tactical display showing allied ships from a dozen species moving to assist damaged vessels. He looked at the planet below, its crystal cities still standing because humans had paid the price to defend them. "With respect, High Arbiter, you are wrong. This is our home now. All of it. And we protect our home." 3 months later, the Galactic Council convened to honor the heroes of the Battle of Vorath Prime. But before the ceremony began, High Arbiter Zethkos made an announcement that changed everything. The classification system that had measured and ranked species for 12,000 years was being abolished. There would be no more Class 7 primitives or Class 1 elders. Every species would be considered equal members of a galactic community that was, for the first time, truly unified. We created the classification system because we believed some species were inherently superior to others, Zethkos explained to the assembled representatives. Humans proved us wrong. They proved that determination matters more than durability. That creativity outweighs calculation. That the willingness to sacrifice for others is the truest measure of any people. He turned toward the human delegation, led by Ambassador Maria Santos, who had come so far from her days as a young officer on the horizon. Gosh, they were not inferior. They were simply different. And in their difference, they have made us all stronger. In the human colonies, the news was celebrated quietly. There were no grand parades. The dead were still being mourned. But there was pride, deep and earned, in what humanity had accomplished. Patricia Holloway, now 71 years old and serving as civilian administrator of the first human colony, watched the announcement with her grandchildren gathered around her. "Grandma," one of them asked, "does this mean we won?" Holloway smiled and pulled the child onto her lap. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the human city of New Horizon. It was a modest place by galactic standards. No crystal towers or energy spires. Just practical buildings made of local materials by people who had learned to make the most of what they had, but it was theirs. Built with their own hands. Defended with their own blood. Earned through courage and sacrifice and a simple refusal to give up no matter what the odds. "It means we showed them who we are," Holloway said, and they finally understood. Above the city, stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere among them, humans were building new homes on new worlds. Children who would never see Earth, or growing up as citizens of a galaxy that finally respected them. It was not the end of humanity's story. It was not even the middle. It was only the beginning, and the best was yet to come.